Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising. This is session number 650. Can you believe it? We have had 650 sessions since we started in May of 2020 in the depths of the pandemic. And we have been navigating our way through, covering all kinds of issues of concern and interest to the human community, to our global community of people in over 130 countries. As you know, we have over 350 co-sponsoring partners, numerous live streaming partners every day. And so I just want to take a moment on day 650 to thank everybody and to welcome all of you back and those of you who are new. I also want to report that the first day of our Summit on Ukraine, which was a presentation by Vladimir Posner on the overview of how we got from the end of the Cold War and the heady days of Gorby mania to the war in Ukraine. And I'm very, very pleased to say that that session went viral. It's been seen by nearly 43,000 people all over the world. Interestingly, most of them in Russia. I've had numerous emails from Ukraine as well. So it's just very affirming for me, and I think for all of us, to know that what we're covering here on Humanity Rising is really getting out there to a global audience around issues that are of utmost gravity in the case of Ukraine for us all to understand. So I wanted to just bring that greeting and that accomplishment. And we'll put the presentation from day one in the chat so you can look at it if you haven't already, and send it out to all your friends, because it's as close to the truth about how we got to this war in Ukraine as anything I've ever heard. And so I'm not surprised that Vladimir Posner's presentation has gone globally viral. I also want to say, just while we're getting started here, that in the United States, we're going into daylight savings time on Sunday. So please bear that in mind for those of you who attend our monthly Chartres community call at 10 a.m. Pacific. Just monitor your clocks. And then all of our Humanity Rising community starting next week, we stay at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, but that means that Europe will need to adjust by that extra hour. So please just note your local times, because next week we have a really exciting series of programs that I will try to mention at the end of our program. So we've gone viral and we're heading into daylight savings time. So thank you, everyone. Today we're going to dive into how we can extend our health span. But we'll get to that in a moment. But before we do, let us just pause, as we always do on Humanity Rising, and simply come together through coherent breathing. In a moment, you'll hear the sound of a bell. When you hear the bell, just breathe in very slowly, fill your lungs for about 5.5 seconds. You'll hear another bell and breathe out for about 5.5 seconds. This gives you 5.5 breaths for a minute, and you ingest 5.5 liters of air. It is, according to ancient mystics and modern science, probably the most effective conscious breathing we can do to increase internal coherence, acuity of the mind, and emotional equilibrium. So welcome, everyone. Let us breathe together, and then we'll dive into our program. Thank you, everyone. It's so good in a tumultuous world to create inner coherence, not only within ourselves, but with each other. I'm always filled with so much love and appreciation for all of you as we breathe our 10 breaths at the beginning of our Humanity Rising session. So I just want to extend that love and appreciation and real gratitude for all of you, for all the support that you have provided as we try day by day to talk about things that matter and encourage people to translate the conversations that matter into actions that make a difference. That's why we're here. That's what makes humanity rise. And so I just want to say I love you to everyone on this fine day, session 650. And now it's my real pleasure and privilege to introduce a very good and old friend of mine who's helped me personally as a board member of Ubiquity University for many years, a founding board member starting in 2012, who came on our board and has navigated all the vicissitudes of fate of any startup company trying to make a big difference in the world with a big dream. And Steve Loyd has been part of that journey now on our board of advisors. But he has a training in law. He's also an entrepreneur. And very importantly, for the purposes of this conversation, he's the founder of Galahad Life Sciences, which has been looking at how it can contribute to a better world through the sciences. And they have just come out with a product, NION, which he is going to tell us about. But the whole motivation and mission of Galahad Life Sciences is how do we increase the human health span? And as you all know, that's been one of the major meta themes of Humanity Rising. And that's why we breathe together, because we all need to pay attention that as the world becomes more chaotic and turbulent external to ourselves, we have to increase in a compensatory way the internal coherence just so we can keep up. And so the theme of regenerative health, the theme of developing our interior capacities and fortitude, not only in terms of our physical health, but our psycho-emotional health and our health as a community, because it's only by holding hands in a container that's motivated by bringing human goodness into the world with every thought and every act and every word that we transact, that's going to enable us to get to where we all know we need to go. So today we're going to talk about how we can expand human longevity, how we can expand human health span. And so Steve Loyd, welcome to Humanity Rising. He's up there in Seattle. And Steve, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to Galahad and this extraordinary new product that you're bringing into the market that would be a benefit to us all.
Thank you very much, Jim. Yeah, it has been a wonderful journey. And I remember the very first time we met, I'd been working with a genius that had combined his knowledge of material science, which to me didn't mean a lot at the time, but just think of Buckminster Fuller. Buckminster Fuller saw carbon, and he knew that it could be everything from a diamond to graphite, just depending on the crystalline structure. That's material science. And so he comes up with, buckyballs. Well, this genius had his basis in material science. He also had been designing and building computer chips. These computer chips basically, were on-off switches with single electrons running down them and helping make decisions. he would design and build these computer chip manufacturing facilities using his material science experience. And he always told me that it is the space between two areas of study is where you make great discoveries. And in fact, some of his discoveries included the touchscreen monitor that we're all familiar with on our cell phones, and the cruise control in our cars, the deployment system for our airbag, and other things that we just take for granted now. And he came to me when I was teaching. I was a professor at the Foster School of Business at the University of Washington. And he came into my class after the end of the class, and he was introduced by another fellow as the smartest man in the world. And we got to know each other really well. And he was, in fact, an amazing genius. And he had begun to explore a third area of expertise, and that is biology, the processes of life. And he was near the end of his life, but he felt he needed to contribute something more, something that would combine the material science expertise he had, the understanding of how to move electrons effectively, and how to design equipment to make that, and then finally, how to improve biological systems. And I know when we first met Jim, it was we were looking at his technology, his science, to change ocean acidification. And he had a very elegant sort of mechanical solution, a technical solution for that. And there was another fellow, I think you know him, who was working on an even more elegant, more natural solution to encourage kelp beds to actually sequester carbon. We realized that part of our approach to dealing with biological systems wasn't embracing deeply the biology and the natural environment to the level that we really thought was appropriate. And so we began to move into another direction, looking at human health. And that discovery was not an easy one. Actually, when we make these discoveries, personal discoveries, they usually involve a side of us that is deeper, and that we become, I don't know, so deeply and emotionally involved that there's an insight that develops. And my insight developed with my mother's passing. Now, we had been working on her health for quite a long time, and she was a vibrant woman, full of energy, but chronic disease after chronic disease. We played whack-a-mole with medical doctors for years and years. And we had rushed to the ER one last time. And as the ER doctors were helping her, rushing around and whatnot, she just looked at me and said, just hold me, just hold me. And I held her. And she whispered in my ear, "I am so tired, Steve." And I realized that all the doctors around us who were scurrying about had stopped what they were doing, and they held the human experience and watched it closely. And two earth-shattering thoughts occurred to me. First of all, these doctors really respected the human condition. They loved life. And second, that they did not have the tools to deal with this time, with the chronic disease that my mom was finally succumbing to out of sheer exhaustion, that they had been playing whack-a-mole with me and with no success. So after my mom's passing, my wife, in her infinite wisdom, knew that I needed some inspiration. So she suggested I go to a town hall meeting where a brilliant man named Jeff Bland was speaking. And he had founded a company called Metagenics. He had written a book with a friend of mine, Joe Pizzorno, who founded Bastyr University. And it was a combination of medical and naturopathic and food as medicine thought. And it became, or it is basically the textbook now at medical schools that can try to combine a deeper understanding of the human health. And Jeff said something to me that was blindingly obvious, possibly, but it really struck me. And it was because I was in this emotional state. He said that aging is the necessary precondition to most of our chronic diseases. I just experienced that. I just seen that. The aging process is the appropriate focus of our medical efforts, not disease. The more that we play whack-a-mole with disease, the more we seem to find another disease later to deal with. In fact, if we are focusing on aging, not disease, that would be our proper focus to extend the quality of life. Forget about extending how long we live, just the quality of our life. And so I began thinking much more deeply about how that changing the quality of our life would improve actually human consciousness, rather than feeling pain for the last 10 years of your life and a long period of decline. If we were actually active contributors, we could become much more conscious of our environment and much more supportive of one another. And it could very well change the human condition in some significant ways. So we jumped into looking at the technology with a great deal of care, the material science, the movement of electrons, and the biology, embracing the notion of the human environment that we're in. So stepping back, we began to embrace the notion of our evolution as humans, that in fact, the Earth carries a strong negative electric potential, that our biome, our geome, has all evolved with this strong negative voltage. And our human condition has grown over literally millions of years, from the very basic cellular level to where we are now with this environment. But more recently, we have cut ourselves off from it. We wear shoes. We don't walk on the surface of the earth. We very seldom walk even on the beach. We're always indoors, and we have an environment that cuts us off from most of the negative voltage that is in the planet Earth. When you look at our biological systems, our blood has a negative voltage. Almost all of our organs have a negative voltage. If you look at the positive voltage in our body, it's our skin. It's the exterior parts. And embryologists look at our digestive system actually as part of our exterior. It's how we get rid of stuff. It's all positive voltage. As we looked at our health issues, we began to realize that cutting ourselves off from this negative voltage with our lifestyles and introducing positive voltage almost everywhere we go, we have become part of the problem with our health. And the medical establishment really hasn't looked at that very deeply, at least as far as we had understood. And so we began to delve into it very deeply ourselves and understood that if we could introduce negative voltage to the human body, that would counteract some of the positive voltage that we're receiving all the time. There's a possibility that we would become much more healthy, and we could actually maybe even extend our lifespan, our health span. So we formed a company, and we began to look at the company and deeply explore. The name of the company, by the way, is Galahad. And one of the things that you taught me, Jim, was the power of legends and stories. I think you've told the Gilgamesh story 100 times, and we embrace the messages that come from that. The story of Galahad, at least as I've heard it, and it inspired us, is that he was on a quest. It was a very human quest to find the Holy Grail and return it to its rightful place. And he and his fellows had been defeated numerous times and had suffered tremendously. They doubted whether or not they would achieve their quest. And he had an apparition that evening, one night, and the apparition came to him and said, Galahad, you have a noble purpose. You have a noble heart, and I will grant you immortality so that you can carry out this noble quest of bringing the Grail to its rightful place. And he thought about it very carefully, about immortality. And he said, I'll accept your proposition. Can you imagine bargaining with the deity? And I'll accept your proposition on one condition. If you will only allow me to decide when I die. I don't really want immortality. I want to decide when I die. And in fact, he did. He carried out his quest. And when he was successful, he was able to transform himself and rise to another level of consciousness. And then he went on to decide that was his time to pass. And I think that's really what we're looking at here, is extending our health span so that we can carry out a more noble purpose in life, that we are living well and we are contributing well up to the very end of our lives. And we're fulfilling our genetic potential. And as we looked into our genetic potential at Galahad, it became clear to us that there was a very serious scientific effort to understand our genetic potential for extending our lifespan. And it could very well extend well beyond 200 years. Now, that is earth-shattering to me, to imagine a solid, productive 200-year lifespan. It also means that we reach a genetic limit and we pass away quickly and in a more fulfilled environment than being held until you're exhausted after a 10 or 15-year effort to fight off chronic disease. It's a vision, is something that we're embracing. And so we began to apply the technology of the material science, the energy, and the earth to create a product. And that led us to the equivalent of 20 years of research to look into the safety of a product that we call NION now. And went through lab tests, human physiology tests. We filed patents, we had FDA reviews, and we launched NION about 30 days ago. It has been a long effort, and it's a very simple product. And that was one of the elements of our scientific exploration, is to create something that is extremely simple. Most really good things are. This is a granule. It's a crystalline material. It holds minerals and a highly charged negative ion potential. Now, the negative ions the granule holds this voltage for quite literally decades now. So long as it remains dry, it is able to pass into us, and we serve it up as an electrolyte drink. Pour it in water, drink it down, and it takes about an hour and a half to release this voltage very slowly into the body, and we've seen enormous health benefits. It's a food. with micronutrients. It's not a drug. And the Food and Drug Administration has looked into this very, very deeply, reviewing our production processes, which, like I mentioned, we have developed with a material scientist to develop the production processes. We manufacture the ingredient here near Seattle in our own facility. We test it when the raw materials come in. We test it during the production process, and then we test it when we ship it out for packaging, and we bring it back here to ship. So we know exactly what we're delivering, and it's not from a third party. And the impact of this has been tremendous. We know that as we've evolved as humans, this negative charge has been around us. We've also been able to see that other animals have adapted as well to this condition. For example, salamanders, when they lose a tail or a limb, a negative charge develops around that area of their body where they can regenerate their tail or their limb. Biological systems have adapted in very, very strong ways to regenerate. And so we have looked into these human clinical trials deeply and have discovered many indications where mood improves substantially when we're introduced to these negative ions. There's even an earthing movement where people actually connect more deeply with the negative charge of the earth to experience increased mood and vitality and other characteristics that put them in better touch with the human condition and their vitality. We also are recognizing that the earth is becoming unbalanced with the addition of very positive ions. The ocean acidification is exactly one of those conditions where positive ions are being added to the ocean to the point where even clams are having a hard time forming their shells still. But it's in our atmosphere, it's in our food. Strangely enough, all of the athletic performance drinks have an abundance of positive ions in them, and it's actually robbing our health in some significant ways. So as we've developed our understanding of the function of negative ions in the human body, we became much more focused on the mitochondria. These are small organelles within the human cell. And the history of the mitochondria goes back to the formation of cellular structures at the beginning of time of life on Earth. These mitochondria have a unique characteristic of having a very strong negative electromotive potential, about 160 negative millivolts. And this is the electron transport chain that produces ATP that runs about 95% of all of the energy that we produce in our cells. Those cells produce all the power that runs our muscles, our brains. Everything in our human condition is actually run by power that's generated by the mitochondria that have been part of our evolution since the beginning of life itself. We have found that NION, when added to your diet, since it carries a strong negative electromotive potential, appears to actually improve the function of your mitochondria. We can produce, your muscles will produce more power. Your muscles will actually last longer. Your muscles will recover quicker. That when you take NION, you not only produce more power, but your body is under less stress. Athletes will work forever to increase one of their conditions of performance, and that is called VO2 max. That is the efficiency with which you convert oxygen intake to power or energy. We increase VO2 max by taking NION. It became clear to us that this product that the FDA reviewed and approved as a unique dietary ingredient of food with no negative side effects would in fact mimic some of the very same conditions that we see with intermittent fasting. And so going back to our very basic evolutionary background, where we did not have the abundance we have now, so that we would not always be able to eat, and that we had an environment where we were more closely connected to the earth, it just made sense to us to embrace some of those initial genetic formative conditions to improve the strength of our health span, our vitality. And so we began to look at combining the characteristics of NION with intermittent fasting. And sure enough, NION seems to improve a condition called autophagy. Autophagy is when you slough off some of the broken parts of your cells and replace them with new parts. It also may improve mitophagy. Mitophagy is when the mitochondria themselves break off parts that aren't being used and make new parts. It seems to reduce visceral fat. That's the fat that builds up in your gut that you see with people that look like they've been drinking beer all their lives. And in fact, they're just on a precipitous decline in their physical health. It improves metabolism and puts you into an improved metabolic state. And so this is over and over and over again. We could see that NION was mimicking some of the conditions of intermittent fasting. And so we felt as though we may have found our tribe, if you would, the tribe of intermittent fasting. And so my wife and I once again began another journey, and we've been avid intermittent fasters now for about a year. And that year has been a transformative period. We've learned very clearly that 1 and 1 equals a lot more than 2. NION combined with intermittent fasting improves autophagy, improves mitophagy. We believe it reduces the number of zombie cells, the cell senescence, the cells that should be cycled out of your body because they're no longer really functioning. It helps reduce those where intermittent fasting does it. NION helps, and 1 and 1, in fact, equals a lot more than 2. So we've headed down this path of introducing the product to the intermittent fasting community because it improves metabolism and because it actually can improve the quality of our lives. And one of the conditions we're finding with intermittent fasting is that it seems to have a very strong connection with extending the human health span and our lifespan. And so we've begun to look at introducing other products in addition to NION over a period of time that would help reduce some of the elements of autophagy or cell senescence that would actually improve and extend our lifespan, and that would allow us to monitor it better. So I'm imagining that Galahad in the future will have not just NION, but a range of other products. And we will also have the ability to help people monitor their cellular health conditions. Actually, my wife and I both have an annual program to test our biological age against our cellular age. And I'm pleased to report that we're both younger than we appear. So that's been a very nice discovery. And we've also used NION and intermittent fasting, not only to produce, to improve our vitality and our health, but we've also used it to test other situations. Like we've decided to do a 10-day water fast. We took a retreat, went to True North in Santa Rosa. We always test these products on ourselves first after we know they're safe. And so we underwent, I think in our case, we 6 or 7 day water fast where you only drink water, no food. And more typically, as you get into this deep ketosis for your metabolism, you will change your, you'll flush toxins out as you go into autophagy and cell senescence is flushed out. You'll feel a keto flu-like condition, that your kidneys ache, you feel sick, you're not at all feeling better. And that didn't happen with when we were taking NION. Our kidneys felt good. We were flushing out toxins like crazy, but we'd actually added some minerals to NION to help flush out and help the liver flush out the some of the toxins. So we're very, very pleased with this initial product, and we continue our studies at major universities. We have safety studies ongoing, but they've been reviewed by published. Actually, the Food and Drug Administration has looked at our production process and has sequestered that under lock and key because we've asked them to keep it private, and they've agreed, but have issued this finding that it's a new dietary ingredient and is safe. And so we continue to test the product and find it to be an exciting new opportunity for us to extend human life and vitality well beyond our current thinking process. Now, it's not going to be an immediate thing where people are living 200 years. I do suspect within the generation that we are seeing born now, people who apply thoughtful approaches to extending their life will see 120 years of a healthful lifespan. And we call health span really that period of time in which you are disease-free. I think that beyond that, we will have many opportunities to extend human health span to 200 years, probably over the next 3 generations. I won't have a chance to see that, but just imagine a world in which you can expect to live 200 years. You will see not only your grandchildren, but your great-grandchildren and their children as well. You will actually maybe be able to experience 7 generations of your family. Remember how, our indigenous populations have taught us that we have to think longer term? Perhaps that's going to be an opportunity for us as we move into a longer lifespan and health span. And even the work that's going on at Ubiquity University, where we see ourselves as continually evolving beings, increasing our consciousness through education and personal involvement and participation in life, that is a lifelong experience, not just one that you do right after high school, that it's a lifelong experience. And if you are living for 200 years or expect to, we are going to become very different beings. And I'm looking forward to having that happen and having the human consciousness expand as a result. Of course, I'm not going to be here in this physical form to see it all, but who knows what form I may be in. So that's kind of the story of NION. If you want to find out more about us, nionhealth.com is the website. That's www.nionhealth.com. NION stands for negative ions. And we have social media available for us, for you to learn about the nerdy science of it all. Evan Amelia has put together interesting sort of tutorials and participation. So check us out on Instagram and other media routines and become part of our tribe. I really would embrace learning more about people who are interested in intermittent fasting. The fasting that my wife and I do are 8 hours of eating, 16 hours of not eating. So we'll typically get up in the morning, have a coffee or a drink. NION has absolutely no calories, so you can have it in the morning, not break your fast, energize yourself. You can feel the energy build over about an hour and a half or 2 hours. And it is a beautiful, non-caffeinated sort of energy. It's not an energetic, shaky sort of thing. And then we have lunch, maybe about noon or 1 o'clock, pretty hearty lunch. And then we have an early dinner. And I've found that to be a wonderful lifestyle, with maybe once or twice a year going on a 10-day water fast to absolutely regenerate and flush out any toxins that may have built up during our indiscretions. And it's turned out to be a very, very beneficial routine for us as well, to introduce NION along with our intermittent fasting. So that's a little bit of our story, Jim. It's probably less than the hour and a half that you anticipated, but I'd be pleased to open it up to any questions or any other observations that you may have. I know that you've been a faster as well, Jim, and that's beautiful. That is beautiful.
Well, Steve, thank you so much. What an inspiring story and passionate exploration in the spirit of Sir Galahad. You know, it calls up the Arthurian Round Table, it calls up the Grail, it calls up, you know, this elixir of life that every human being seeks in one way or another. And so the embodiment of your exploration into human longevity through the archetypal form of Galahad is very inspiring in and of itself. We've had lots of questions and comments. I'm trying to just order them just so that we can fill out some of the things that you said. And let's start with the most basic point that I believe that you're making around this balance between positive and negative ions. And would love to hear you speak a little bit more about it, because obviously, as a number of people have mentioned in the chat, there's all kinds of products out there around magnetic poles, the north-south, making sure your magnetic pole distribution is correct, grounding mats that you can get, you know, on Amazon, you know, walking barefoot in your backyard, all kinds of ways to ground ourselves in earth energies in a more healthful, productive way. But say a little bit more about this positive negative ion balance and how ingesting NION as a food that fills your body with negative ions over a 90, 120 minute span of time, how does that all work? And is that a product that should be taken alone? Is it good to also have a magnetic mat and a grounding mat? There's some people that sleep on magnetic mats in their bed. I have one at home on my chair. So
Yeah.
I'm grounded. But speak more about that so we more fully understand your perspective on it. And what is the differential in that domain that NION is actually making?
Jim, that's a great actually set of questions, some of which we are exploring quite deeply. And to try to keep it simple, there's a principle that we are embracing in which there is more to material science than just material. In other words, our thinking processes are very much oriented to a particular molecule connecting with another atom to make something. And the energetics around that are usually ignored. And in fact, the energetics are really important. And we're beginning to scratch the surface of understanding that. So, for example, table salt, NaCl, looks very pretty sitting on your table. When you put it on your food and you ingest it, you get a positive ion of sodium. The World Health Organization just came out with a report yesterday saying 1.8 million people are going to die from ingesting sodium. That's the ion, in fact. It's not necessarily the sodium, it's the positive charge associated with sodium, because it runs around in your body, and sodium, and even worse, hydrogen ions that have a positive charge are missing an electron. That electron that they're missing, they're looking for everywhere in your body. They'll run around your body looking for an electron. And so I refer to them as the philanderers of our body's electrons. Okay. They'll pair up with anybody, anytime, anywhere they can get an electron. Now, if it just happens to be a delicate protein that is running an enzyme to keep your body functioning well, it can attach to a spot where it sees an electron, and it can twist that enzyme way out of whack, and it no longer works.
Mm-hmm.
So that's partly the marriage of materials, that is, these physical things, and the energies they carry and how they manifest in material things. Now, the more fundamental question is, where are these other energetic elements that are not necessarily directly material? How do they affect our bodies? And that's when you get into the earthing, and that's when you get into the polarities and all that, because we recognize very clearly that an electron, which sometimes is actually a thing, and scientifically it's sometimes not a thing at all. It's just an energy, and where does that continuum occur, and how does it affect us? Well, the answers are the continuum occurs everywhere, and it connects us with a lot of experiences ranging from earthing to this polarity with the earth. And our bodies are set up to operate in that environment because we've evolved over eons and eons that way. And we have consciously cut ourselves off from them. Consciously, because it's easier to wear shoes than it is to go barefoot everywhere. It's because it's more convenient to live under a roof than outdoors, and we run cars that create exhaust that rains down in acid rain. I mean, on and on. It just blows your mind how we've polluted ourselves. and we are not really clear about the energetic aspects of it. We are more clear about the material aspects of it. But the energetic aspects, that's where the beauty of the material scientist who pairs the material and the energetics, and then the third element, the biologics, has really created an area of amazing new discovery. And so getting back to your point about the ingesting this, the mitochondria have a negative 160 millivolt charge. That is the highest negative charge anywhere in the body. And when that charge runs down, they no longer produce ATP. We get exhausted. And we add 330 negative millivolts to the body on a daily basis of 3 grams, pour into water, and we drink it down. Now that enters your body, and it begins to diffuse this voltage. And this voltage travels very fast. So we've got to be careful to release it very slowly. Athletes have actually reported after drinking this, their cramps go away immediately. There's not enough time, actually, for the chemical to go from your mouth to your to the cramp muscle. It happens immediately. It's a voltage, it's an energy flow that occurs. And so it has to get into the body to work best, I believe, because our skin actually is somewhat insulating. Our internal side is very moist, and we're mostly water, right? And when we get these ions inside us, when we get this material inside us, they become ions because we've added water to them. NION will remain absolutely stable at 330 millivolts of electric potential for 10 years or longer. Once we add water, like our bodies, it begins to release. And that is the experience we feel. And we believe that voltage actually helps the mitochondria carry out its function longer and better. Now, we're submitting studies to NIH and others to continue this research so that we have a much deeper understanding of it. And we would imagine that over the next decades, we will become not only the authority in this area, but also the authority in intermittent fasting and how 1 + 1 equals much more than 2 in this extending our longevity and health.
Yeah. Wonderful. That's extraordinary. Now, Carol Sue Engelman wrote something in the chat. I trying to just test out to you. She's saying that her guess from what you were saying is that this NION bonds with the free radicals that are roaming around the blood freely and neutralizes them, pulls out the toxin from the fat cells and pulls out the heavy metals that may be impeding some of this process. Is that part of what the negative ions do in the body?
Absolutely, yes. So, for example, there's one really deadly negative ion. I'm sorry, positive ion, I should say, is hydrogen, a free-floating hydrogen ion. It oftentimes pairs up with water to make, instead of H2O, make H3O. And that is really, really harsh on the body. We're able to add a hydroxyl ion to the equation to make 2 water molecules where there is one very dysfunctional positively charged ion. And so we'll actually improve hydration along that process, which improves the release of the toxins. And then we've had some micronutrients to help flush out the toxins. So is this Suzanne? She knows her stuff.
Thank you, Carol Sue.
Carol Sue, yes.
And then another question, you haven't mentioned the telomeres. There's obviously a lot of interest in extending the telomeres, and as we age, the telomeres get shorter, broken. And so have there been studies on the effect of the NION supplement on the telomere health?
Yeah, Jim, there are about 9 components of the aging process that we're focusing on. And the telomere length is one of them. But NION is not everything for all purposes.
Right.
And there are going to be other products we will be introducing in the future that will be able to address the telomere issue, which we think is another major breakthrough possibility with some of these technologies. We'll probably always be using NION as a base, and then we'll be adding some of our technology to enhance it to deal with issues like telomere length.
Right. Now, the 9 indicators of aging, just briefly enumerate those, just so people have a sense of.
Oh boy, Jim, I wish I could.
Okay. Give a half a dozen.
So cell senescence, for example, is one of them, and the tendency for our bodies to build up kind of zombie cells that should have been flushed out of our body long ago, but they're still kind of hanging around.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of theories about, gee, this is just part of our aging process, and maybe it's part of the cancer characteristics that occur, as we age. These zombie cells sitting around should have been flushed out, and they just don't. That's a big issue, I think, for us to address. The mitochondria is our number one area to focus on right now. The free radicals that Carol mentioned, that's another major theory about the aging process, getting rid of the free radicals. Now, that is not as embraced by medical science as the other 9, but we're going to look at each of them in turn. The telomeres would be one, and address them with great care. I think one of the positive signs is that we have a National Institute of Health that has a group focused on the aging process. In part, this is good, and in part, it is bad, because there has been an effort underway to declare aging to be a disease. Now, that to me is not attractive notion. Aging is a process. If it's declared a disease, then it will be only treatable by drugs. Ergo, huge dollar signs among the pharmaceutical industry to capture our ability to have vibrant, long lives. And so we are resisting that approach. That is part of our tribe, to look to food to be, and lifestyle to be our avenue to extend vitality and life. So that's our perspective. And so there are positive signs, because this is a science that big money interests have shown strong interest in capturing. And we want to resist that too.
Oh, I am sure. Because everybody wants to live longer and everybody more fundamentally wants to live healthier.
Yes.
And
more vitality.
Yeah. And, as we mentioned on Humanity Rising before, which I think is a good point to just illuminate a little bit, that the theory around disease and germs, beginning with Louis Pasteur, has been that you see something and you kill it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Whereas the and that leads to most of modern medicine, including vaccines, that you want to kill whatever that is. And the other approach by a contemporary of Pasteur's, a guy by the name of Beauchamp, was that no, the way to understand disease is within the context of the overall body system, and that medicine, as Galahad is doing, needs to be supporting the body's capacity to be healthy and whole. And if you support the body doing what it needs to do at an optimal level, it will take care of the disease. So the focus needs to be on wholeness, not, going out there and killing something in the body, which produces all the side effects and all the catastrophic consequences that we see every day in multiple ways that is being generated by big pharma. So as I understand you correctly, that's your approach as well, as how do you support body, mind, spirit wholeness?
Absolutely, Jim. As only you can do. You state it with great clarity, and that is precisely what we are embracing. Yeah. And it's still, I mean, that was the inspiration from Jeff Bland and Joe Pizzorno, who look to the body's capability to address the disease, the affronts that occur, and the body is a lot smarter than we are in a lot of ways. And it doesn't help it to break it down into its component pieces. Absolutely. And just attack piece by piece. It's a whole system. And you've taught me that, and part of the Ubiquity nation, I think, is really embracing that approach to wholeness. That's the only way we're going to be healed, is to be looking at ourselves from a whole perspective. Totally. Well, in that spirit, let's turn to fasting, because as you mentioned, I've been a long-term faster for many decades now. Actually, I've found just sort of periodic cleansing, and there's a variety of fasting techniques, as you probably all know out there, because fasting has been one of the ways that not only humans but animals have dealt with disease since time immemorial. It's part of the evolutionary awareness of animals that one of the ways to deal with the discomfort or a disease is to begin to starve the body, so it actually begins to consume itself. And it always does so by taking out those rogue cells and cancerous cells and broken cells and eliminating them. And that is what produces wholeness. And I'm fascinated by your personal and also professional discovery now, that if you bond the ingestion of the negative ions through NION with intermittent fasting, that you enhance its effect, because that feels to me to be really revolutionary. And I would love to just have you talk more about fasting generally and the utility of intermittent fasting, which is a relatively new phenomenon. It used to be that you just fasted for 7 days or 10 days. Jesus and Moses and Rumi, all these guys fasted for 40 days, the Buddha. But what you're saying is you fast a little bit each day, combined with NION, to enhance the overall salutary effect. So say more about that. Well, when we started down the path of fasting, there was a bit of pushback saying, well, gosh, you have to eat every day, or everybody knows that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. In fact, that was really a marketing slogan from Kellogg, and it sort of defied what we were seeing from the scientific literature, that in fact, just like you were saying, many, many health conditions are enhanced, and many diseases are eliminated, through the fasting routines. And so the idea of intermittent fasting, we began to research very carefully, and we saw that when you put yourself in a stress situation like that, which we were also doing with NION, we were putting people under stress and we were seeing what their physiological responses were. It seemed as though one, NION, was mimicking the other, intermittent fasting. All the scientific literature coming out was kind of in jiving. And so my wife, who's a bit of a gourmet cook, but a vegetarian, decided, okay, let's skip breakfast because I really don't like breakfast that much anyway. And let's try something simple. And so we did, and it was actually quite easy, just to get into the routine of, coffee in the morning with your NION, and then just, not eat until noon, and then have actually a pretty good lunch, and then a little bit lighter dinner, and it seemed like an easy routine. Then we started researching more with people who were doing the 5 and 2. That is, they would not eat for 2 days, and then they would go ahead and eat normally for 5. All of the information was showing us that either of these systems would induce autophagy, that is, the cleaning out of broken parts of your cells. And it was pretty gentle, and it wasn't, terribly difficult to do with just the skipping the breakfast. So it was something that was really easy to comply with. And we just noticed that the health effects that we were feeling with NION were being multiplied, which was very gratifying.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just did more and deeper literature research on the fasting characteristics. And that's when and then the funny thing to me is that it's something that a lot more people do than talk about. If you're a golfer, everybody knows you're a golfer. If you're an intermittent faster, very seldom do people walk around with a t-shirt saying, hey, I'm an intermittent faster. So when we started talking to people about this, we were very surprised and pleased to say, oh, I intermittent fast, or I've been thinking about that. And as we got deeper and deeper into this, we saw some very serious folks who were doing the longer term, more traditional fast, the water fast, where you just didn't eat any food for a period of 10, 15, 20, 40 days. And so we began to interview some of those people. And Gail and I decided to do a 10-day water fast in Santa Rosa, like I experienced or expressed, with medical supervision. That is, you had your initial, blood work, you had a consult with the doctor, and then every day you had a consult with the doctor, morning and evening. You check out your hydration levels, your vitals, and everything of that sort. And the effect was like a rocket. We felt not a ton more energy, but strangely enough, our, sugar cravings, if you would, or even the desire for caffeine in the morning, gone. It changed, it facilitated a lifestyle change. And so
you took the NION with the water fast.
That's right. We did.
I gotcha.
Now that was, and in fact, there are some institutes that describe the importance of taking electrolytes prior to a fast. Now, the Institute True North Health does not advise that. They are true purists about the whole thing, but we inserted it ourselves, and they seem to be pleased enough with the results that they're going to help us do clinical trials with it. And so it's a beautiful community, honestly, and we're really pleased to be part of it. You know me, Jim, I get embracing into a community and I'm part of the ritual team, So,
Totally, totally. By the way, Chari Stover has done some research while we've been talking and has come up to with the 9 areas of
Oh,
aging
good.
that
Yes.
and it's genomic instability,
Yep.
telomere attrition, epigenetic alterations, mitochondrial dysfunction, loss of proteostasis, deregulated nutrient sensing, stem cell exhaustion, altered intercellular communication, and cellular senescence. Those are the 9 hallmarks of aging. I don't know what all of them actually mean. I know some of them. But of those, the NION works on which one of those the most effectively?
Well, the one we've researched the most is the mitochondria
So it's the
dysfunction.
mitochondrial dysfunction. That's what it really enhances.
But you look also at the proteogenesis, for example, or dysfunction of the proteins is really what it says. And these proteins are very, very complex molecules, and they only work if they hold their particular configuration. So if you've ever seen an enzyme, for example, it looks like a huge just jumble of, but it has a very precise shape.
Yeah.
Now, when you introduce positive ions, that is, atoms that are looking for an extra electron, they will attach themselves to these enzymes, and it will result in them twisting out of shape. They no longer work. That's a big problem. And that's one of the areas that we're exploring, dealing with or getting rid of. The other piece of it is the DNA characterization. Now, one of the processes to turn on and turn off DNA is called methylation. And that's when a carbon and a couple, 3, 4 hydrogens attach to a specific portion of the DNA. That is used to turn off functions of your DNA, which is really important. And that's a very controlled mechanism. When that mechanism gets out of control, that's actually called aging. And there's a test called DNA methylation. And I'm pleased to report that my DNA methylation is about 7 years younger than my chronological age.
Fantastic.
So that's a lot of exploration for us to get into, but these are characterizations of areas that we will be exploring. So you're right. These are the 9 hallmarks of aging, and we are diving in there deeply. And right now, mitochondria is where we're at because, well, frankly, you feel it the most. You feel it the fastest, and you see the results really.
Yeah.
Well.
And I'm sure they're derivative as the mitochondrial index goes up. I'm sure it has cascading effects through the rest of the body.
Absolutely. Everything works better. And so the results, improve throughout.
Now, let me ask you just a very simple question that Jane Norton is bringing in. She says, I thought that the research was that you were supposed to have a big breakfast and that it enhances your capacity during the day, particularly if you have a big protein breakfast. You're supposed to eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper, if I remember what the adage was. Now, is that no longer true, or is that true basically, but there's also this parallel universe called intermittent fasting?
Well, Jim, my perspective is that each of us have very individual requirements. Yeah. And sometimes we've been sold generic requirements with a guy, for example, Kellogg, who decided that your breakfast was your most important meal of the day because he had grains he wanted to sell you. For some people, that's really true. For others, it's not true at all. And one of the things that we're eventually going to head toward is personalized nutritional advice. Once we get, data and input from people who are trying different regimens and whatnot, and we get their information, we've also been compiling over the last 10 or 15 years a database of hundreds of thousands of peer-reviewed articles and tests and studies of nutrition and disease relationships, so that through AI, we can begin to analyze strengths and weaknesses of a person's health and nutritional strategies. That's where we're going with this eventually, so that we can actually advise people very specifically for their specific body type and conditions, what is the best approach. For us, limiting the amount of time we have to eat, that is no more than, maybe 30 calories between 6 o'clock at night and noon the next day, that allows our cells to go into autophagy. That is, our metabolic system changes from burning glucose to burning ketones. The ketones are derived from dissolving our fat cells, and those fat cells produce the ketones that actually run our metabolism. And that also flushes out toxins which are stored in our fat cells. And that's where you get the kind of the keto flu idea, where sometimes we don't feel great if we've not been eating well. But every person is different. And if breakfast is really important for that person, I'd advise them to just have a great late lunch and call it a day.
That's extraordinary. And the NION then can fit into anybody's routine.
Absolutely. Oh, it has no calories. When you are digesting food, your stomach will excrete a ton of positive ions to help with the digestive process. And remember, embryologists look at our digestive system as part of the outside of our body. It's counterintuitive, but it actually is. When we're an embryo, it's the outside curves in to create a tunnel that starts here and ends there. That is kind of like the outside of your body from your cellular perspective.
Yeah.
So
Good
it
point.
generates a ton of positive ions to help with the digestion process, to help push it out of your system. So I typically wouldn't advise people to take their NION gulp down at that time, because your body's trying to get rid of those positive ions, introduce our negative ions on an empty stomach. It has no calories. You won't break your fast. It'll help with the entire autophagy process.
Yeah, so it's better to take the NION than on an empty stomach when you're not planning to eat for several hours.
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
And it's probably is it then the best in the morning, or would it be good to take it late at night before you go to bed?
Well, I like to take it in the morning because I do feel energized. I feel, ready to take on the day. And I don't have breakfast, and so it fits perfectly with my routine. If you are a morning person eating a big breakfast and you have a late lunch, it depends on, and then if you want to go work out, I'd take it before working out. You'll feel great. That will really magnify itself.
Fantastic. Steve, you're doing such an incredible thing. I'm just fascinated and enthralled that we have that at our disposal, and it's on the market and available at nionhealth.com.
Yes. Yeah. And Jim, it's always been such a pleasure knowing you and working with you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in Chartres this year.
Cool.
Very much like to do that.
Cool. Yes. I look forward to seeing you and Gail as being part of our ritual team.
Yes.
Okay, my friend. Well, listen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That will bring us to a close, everyone. But I think what we've heard today is something that's really important. You know, in this world of escalating not only turbulence, but environmental toxicity, anything that we can do naturopathically, meaning no side effects, no weird chemicals, just supporting our body processes to enhance, in this case, the mitochondrial aspect of aging, which reverberates through the rest of the system, is something that I think we want to really look at. So I would urge all of us to take a moment to go to nionhealth.com and see what they have to offer, and consider getting the product and combining it with intermittent fasting. I think that would be a wonderful thing to try. I intend to try it, Steve. When I get back, I'm going to order.
I'd love to have you part of the tribe.
Why not? Why not?
Yeah, you bet.
Why not? And so that'll do it for us today, everyone. And have a good weekend. Again, a reminder that we're going into daylight savings time in the United States. So those of you who watch us in Europe next week, it's an hour earlier. So just bear that in mind. Also for the Chartres community call that happens this Sunday, daylight savings time starts on Sunday. So we hope to see you all next week and in our Sunday call. But thank you, Steve. This has been an inspiration, and I feel healthier just listening to what you had to say.
Hey, thank you, Jim.
All right. You're all welcome to the after session chat group. You'll see the chat link in the chat box that Stan just put in. Have a good weekend. We'll see you all Monday. Bye for now.